My friends, before we talk about the 5 practical places where you can put salt in your home, let me take you back to something very simple but very profound. Salt is something we often overlook because it is so common. It sits on every dining table. It flavors almost every meal, and yet most of us don't stop to realize that it is one of the most ancient and powerful elements given to us. Salt is not just for the kitchen. It has been used for thousands of years to preserve food, to cleanse, and even to symbolize purity and covenant. When you think about it, salt represents something much deeper than just a seasoning. It represents preservation, protection, and blessing. Now, imagine if something as small and ordinary as a grain of salt could bring about a shift in the atmosphere of your home. We live in a world where we are surrounded by noise, pressure, and negativity. Our home should be the one place where we feel peace, comfort, and renewal. But sometimes, without even realizing it, heaviness creeps in. Tension lingers in the air, restlessness keeps us awake at night, and the sense of freshness in our home slowly disappears. And yet God has hidden wisdom in the simplest things. Salt, this humble substance, carries with it both a natural and a spiritual dimension. I remember when I was a child, my grandmother would place small dishes of salt in the corners of her home. At the time, I thought it was just an old superstition. But as I grew older, I began to see that she wasn't just doing it out of habit. She was expressing a deep understanding of how the physical and the spiritual often intertwine. The salt absorbed moisture. It kept the air lighter, and in her heart, it was a way of asking for God's protection and cleansing over the household. It taught me that sometimes the most ordinary things can become extraordinary when we recognize their purpose. Salt also carries a spiritual reminder. Jesus himself said, "You are the salt of the earth." That means salt has a role not only in flavoring, but in preserving and protecting. Just as salt prevents decay, your presence in your home is meant to prevent spiritual decay, to preserve peace, to bring flavor to the atmosphere. By placing salt in intentional places, you're not practicing magic or superstition. You are simply acknowledging that God can use even simple elements of creation to restore balance and bring renewal. It is a small physical act with a larger spiritual impact. And this is why we must not dismiss salt as insignificant. Think of how little it takes to season a whole dish. A pinch is enough. In the same way, when you apply these simple steps in your home, it doesn't take much to shift the atmosphere. God works through the small, the humble, the overlooked. That's why, when we start looking at salt with fresh eyes, it becomes not just something in the kitchen cabinet, but a reminder of God's provision, His purity, and His presence in the daily fabric of our lives. So before we move into the 5 places where salt can be placed, I want you to understand this. What we are talking about is not superstition, but stewardship. We are learning to use what God has given us to create an environment where peace, blessing, and health can flourish. And it all begins with seeing salt not just as ordinary, but as extraordinary. When we step into our homes, the very first thing we encounter are the corners, the edges where walls meet, the places often hidden from view. Corners are interesting. They collect what we don't notice. Dust gathers there, air becomes stagnant there. And in many traditions, people have long believed that corners are not just physical spaces, but spiritual ones too. That's why placing salt in the corners of your rooms has carried meaning for centuries. It's a way of refreshing what is hidden and clearing out what tends to linger. Think about it. In life, most of us pay attention to what's in the center, the visible, the obvious. But often it is what hides in the corners that shapes the atmosphere. A word spoken in anger that hangs in the air, an unspoken tension between family members, an anxiety that isn't addressed. All of these can remain tucked away like dust in a corner, slowly influencing the atmosphere of our home. We walk into a room and feel something heavy, though we can't explain why. This is where something as simple as salt can play a remarkable role. Salt naturally absorbs. Scientifically, it draws in moisture. It clears the air of dampness, and it even reduces odors. Spiritually, it reminds us that the unseen places matter, that God cares not only for what is visible, but also for what is hidden. When you place a little salt in the corners of your home, you are making a small act of faith, saying, Lord, cleanse the hidden places. It becomes a symbol that nothing is too small or too hidden to be renewed. I remember a time when a family came to me after years of feeling unrest in their home. Everything looked beautiful from the outside. The furniture was arranged well. The house was clean. But whenever they entered, they felt weighed down, as if something invisible pressed against their hearts. I told them, sometimes you need to take care of the corners, not just the center. They began to place small bowls of salt in the corners of their living room, their bedrooms, even in the hallway where shadows tended to linger. Within days, they noticed a shift. The air felt lighter. They themselves felt calmer. What had seemed like a heavy cloud began to lift, not because of superstition, but because they were intentional about inviting purity into the hidden spaces. Isn't it interesting that God often works in the corners of our lives? He goes to the places we neglect, the areas we think are too small to matter. And He brings light, cleansing, and restoration. Just as salt draws out impurities, God desires to draw out what doesn't belong in the atmosphere of our homes. He wants our families to breathe freely, to rest peacefully, and to live joyfully. But sometimes that begins by attending to the corners, the places we overlook. So when you place salt in the corners of your rooms, don't see it as a ritual. See it as a prayer in action. It is a declaration that even in the hidden spaces, there will be light, there will be freshness, and there will be peace. When we think about our homes, one of the most important parts are the doors and the windows. They are the entry points. Through them, light comes in, fresh air flows, and people we love walk inside. But through those same doors and windows, things we do not want can also enter. Dust, insects, and even negative influences can slip in unnoticed. That is why, for centuries, people have placed salt near doors and windows. Not because salt is magical, but because it serves as both a physical barrier and a spiritual reminder that what enters our home matters. Salt has a remarkable way of creating boundaries. In the natural sense, it deters pests and purifies what passes over it. If you sprinkle a little salt near a threshold, you'll notice how insects avoid it. But beyond that, salt has long symbolized protection. In the same way that salt preserves food from corruption, it has been seen as a shield that guards a household from corruption at its entry points. By placing salt near your doorways and windows, you are declaring, this home is a place of peace, and nothing harmful is welcome here. I recall visiting a family who always struggled with unrest. They told me, Pastor, we pray, but somehow we feel our peace leaves the moment we open the door. I looked at their home and I told them gently, you need to set boundaries, not only spiritual ones in prayer, but also practical ones as a symbol. They placed small amounts of salt at their doors and along the windowsills. And they prayed as they did it, Lord, let nothing come through here that does not belong. It was not about superstition, but about taking an act of faith. And they testified later that their home felt different. The air was lighter and their nights were calmer. Doors and windows are symbolic in Scripture as well. They represent opportunities, choices, and the pathways of blessing. But they also represent vulnerability. Just as you lock your doors at night to keep your family safe, there is wisdom in setting spiritual locks too. Salt when placed at these entry points, is like saying to your household, we are watchful, we are mindful. We will not allow everything from outside to come in unchecked. It is a small gesture, but it carries a strong message. This home is consecrated, set apart and covered. What I want you to see is that our homes are more than buildings. They are sanctuaries. They are places where our children grow, where our hearts rest, where our souls are refreshed. And if we want to protect that sanctuary, we must be intentional at the entry points. Placing salt by doors and windows is a reminder to ourselves and a declaration to the spiritual atmosphere. Only what is good, pure, and peaceful may enter here. So when you lay that salt near your doors and windows, do it with faith. You are not just scattering grains, you are establishing boundaries. You are saying, this home belongs to peace, to protection, and to blessing. If there is one place in the house that is often overlooked, but has the greatest potential to affect the health and atmosphere of a home, it is the bathroom. It is the place where water flows constantly, where moisture gathers, and where, if not cared for, odors and mold can quickly develop. The bathroom is designed for cleansing, for refreshing ourselves, but ironically it can become the very place where unclean things linger. That is why using salt in the bathroom is so powerful. Salt has the natural ability to absorb moisture, to neutralize odors, and to prevent the growth of mold and mildew. It takes what is damp and stagnant and brings it back to balance. Think for a moment about how salt works. Just a handful placed in a small dish and set in the bathroom begins to pull in excess humidity from the air. It dries out what would otherwise become a breeding ground for bacteria. It clears away odors that tend to settle in places where water is constantly used. Without any chemicals, without complicated methods, salt quietly does its work of cleansing. This is not only practical, it also carries a symbolic meaning. Just as salt purifies the air and keeps mold from spreading, God desires to purify the hidden corners of our lives and prevent things from growing in us that do not belong. I once spoke with a young couple who told me that their bathroom always smelled unpleasant no matter how often they cleaned. They tried sprays, candles, and even new cleaners, but nothing seemed to help. I suggested they place a small bowl of salt on a shelf and simply leave it there. Within days, that they noticed the air felt different. The odor disappeared and the space felt lighter. They were amazed at how something so simple brought such a noticeable change. And I reminded them, this is exactly how God works. He takes something small, something ordinary, and uses it to bring a shift in the atmosphere. The bathroom, in many ways, represents the areas of our lives where cleansing takes place. It is the space where we wash away the dirt and refresh ourselves. And yet, it can also become the place where unseen problems grow if we are not attentive. Placing salt there is not only a practical step to maintain freshness, but it is also a prayerful act that says, Lord, keep this place of cleansing truly clean. Let no impurity, no decay, no heaviness remain here. When we learn to invite even the smallest reminders of God's purity into the spaces where we live, our entire home begins to reflect peace and balance. The bathroom may seem like the last place to think about, but remember, peace begins where cleansing happens. And when salt is placed there, both naturally and spiritually, it helps restore freshness. It pushes back what doesn't belong and it invites the blessing of renewal to flow into the very place meant for cleansing. So whenever you place salt in your bathroom, let it be a reminder this is not just about air or moisture, but about creating an atmosphere where even the unseen places remain clean, refreshed, and filled with peace. The kitchen is often called the heart of the home. It is where meals are prepared, where families gather, and where memories are made. But it is also a place that can easily carry strong odors, messes, and lingering reminders of yesterday's meals. If we are not careful, the very heart of our home can become weighed down by smells and impurities that take away from the warmth it was meant to give. This is why salt has such an important role in the kitchen. More than just a seasoning for our food, salt becomes a purifier, a cleanser, and a natural restorer of freshness in the place where life in the home flows. Salt has the ability to neutralize odors in a way that sprays or chemicals cannot. When you pour a little down the drain or leave a small dish on the countertop, it quietly works to absorb smells that would otherwise linger. A sink that carries the odor of old food can be refreshed simply by scrubbing it with salt and rinsing it with water. Cutting boards that hold the scent of onions or garlic can be rubbed with salt and lemon to restore their cleanliness. Salt does not just cover up what is unpleasant, it removes it at the root. This is such a powerful picture of what God desires to do in our lives. He doesn't simply mask what is wrong. He cleanses it, He purifies it, He makes it new. I remember visiting a family who had almost given up on cooking at home because they said their kitchen always felt heavy with smells and mess. They relied more and more on eating out, which created strain financially and even emotionally. I told them, don't neglect the heart of your home. Take a simple step. Place salt where it is needed. They began sprinkling it in the sink, using it to scrub their pans, and even leaving a little near the stove. Over time, they said the kitchen felt different. Not just cleaner, but lighter, more inviting. And as the atmosphere shifted, they found themselves cooking together again, laughing together again, and sharing meals with joy. All because something as small as salt helped restore what had been lost. The kitchen, my friends, is more than a workspace. It is a place of fellowship. It is where we break bread, where we nourish our bodies, and where our conversations often go deeper than we realize. If the kitchen is filled with odors, clutter, or heaviness, it can affect the way we relate to one another. But if it is filled with freshness, warmth, and purity, it becomes a place where blessing flows. Salt in the kitchen is not about superstition. It is about stewardship. It is about caring for the atmosphere of the very heart of your home. So when you use salt in your kitchen, let it be more than cleaning. Let it be a declaration that this space, the center of family life, will remain pure, inviting, and full of peace. One of the most important places in the home, though often forgotten, is the space where we rest, our bed. Sleep is not just a physical necessity. It is a gift from God, a time for our bodies to recover, our minds to reset, and our spirits to be renewed. Yet how many people lie down at night and find that sleep does not come easily? Instead of peace, there is tossing and turning. Instead of rest, there is stress and worry. Sometimes the problem is not just in our thoughts, but also in the very atmosphere of where we sleep. This is why placing salt under the bed or even beneath the mattress can make a difference. Salt works quietly, but it has the power to absorb moisture, to draw out what is unclean, and to create balance in the air. When placed near the place of rest, it becomes a subtle but powerful ally in restoring peace. From a practical perspective, salt reduces humidity. Moisture in the air can lead to dust mites, mold, and allergens that affect our breathing and disturb our rest. By simply placing a small dish of salt under the bed, the air becomes drier and cleaner. Many people who have tried this find that they wake up with fewer allergies and less congestion. But beyond the physical, salt symbolizes purity and preservation. Just as it protects food from decay, it can serve as a symbol of God's protection over the hours of sleep when we are most vulnerable. It is a gentle reminder that even when we close our eyes, He watches over us. I once met a woman who told me she had struggled for years with restless nights. She tried different mattresses, she changed pillows, but still, She never felt refreshed. I encouraged her to try something simple, place a bowl of salt beneath her bed and pray as she did so, asking God to remove every heaviness and to fill that space with His peace. She was skeptical at first, but after a few days, she noticed her sleep was deeper, her dreams calmer, and she woke up with more energy. She told me later, it was as if a weight lifted from my room, and I reminded her, that is the beauty of God's wisdom. He can use even the smallest things to restore what the enemy tries to steal. Our bedrooms should be sanctuaries of rest, not battlegrounds of stress. When we bring salt into that space, especially beneath the place where we sleep, we are taking an intentional step to guard our rest. It is a way of saying, Lord, let this be more than a bed. Let it be an altar of renewal. Remove every distraction, every disturbance, and fill this place with peace. Sleep is holy. It is where God renews us for the day ahead. And when salt is placed under the bed, it is not just about cleaner air. It is about inviting balance, calm, and blessing into the very hours we are unaware. So when you place salt beneath your bed, remember this truth even in the silence of the night. God desires to guard your rest and fill your sleep with peace.